I just came across this, and I was honestly surprised. After watching the trailers and doing some research to make sure it was really a new Painkiller game, I was left with mixed feelings, though I have to admit, they lean more toward the negative side.
Friends!
Let's go, on me!
Painkiller was developed in 2004 by the Polish studio People Can Fly and published by Dreamcatcher Interactive. The game was well received, part of that early 2000 era when modern shooters were shifting away from old-school design, health packs were being replaced by a regenerating health, weapon limits were introduced, and movement was becoming slower and more grounded, often relying on cover and tactical pacing instead of pure chaos. Painkiller stood out as something different, a mix of Quake and Serious Sam. It focused on fast-paced combat and massive waves of enemies rather than scripted sequences. The story wasn't the main focus, but it was still present, told through 3D cutscenes. You played as Daniel, a man trapped in purgatory after dying in a car accident with his wife Catherine. He was sent to heaven, but because of Daniel's shady past, he remained stuck between worlds. One day, an angel named Samael offered him a deal: kill 4 of Lucifer's generals to prevent a war between heaven and hell, and he'd be allowed to reunite with his wife.
He has his reasons, and he doesn't have to explain them to anyone.
Across 4 chapters, you fought a wide variety of enemies: skeletal warriors in graveyards, zombie ninjas on frozen bridges, deranged patients crawling on asylum ceilings, and armored dogs in haunted castles. Despite having a lot of levels with different themes, they surprisingly managed to make them all fit together, with plenty of unique designs that still felt consistent within this purgatory world. After the first chapter, you met Eve.
Ever wonder why there are graves in a place like this? Easy now.
The wandering spirit who became a fan favorite for obvious reasons. She guided Daniel toward his next targets. Each chapter ended with a massive boss battle, forcing you to think beyond mindless shooting. Of course, you weren't defenseless. You had a full arsenal of weapons, each with a unique secondary fire mode. The shotgun could freeze enemies solid, shattering them with a single blast, even the tougher ones. The stake launcher could pin foes to walls or fire grenades at rapid speed. And the Painkiller itself, your first weapon, acted like a spinning saw blade you could launch forward. It also fired energy bolts that created a damaging energy link between the weapon and the projectile. Each level wasn't just dark and claustrophobic. Sure, you had those smaller, dark maps, but there were also wide, bright environments that broke the pattern. It was fun how they kept mixing things up instead of sticking to one type of setting or encounter. Oh, and who can forget the ragdoll physics? Pure awesomeness.
Bye, Miss Laura.
More useful while playing on harder difficulties, you had access to a tarot card system that you could unlock at the end of level by completing specific objectives. These cards gave you a choice between different passive and active abilities, such as reducing incoming damage or increasing the time souls remain before disappearing. Speaking of souls, after killing an enemy, they dropped those green energy you could collect. Not only did it restore 1 point of health, but after collecting 66 of them, you transform into a demon, becoming invincible and gaining overpowered attacks for a limited time. One aspect we notice is how Purgatory is portrayed as familiar instead of an otherworldly environment. It makes it clear that this isn't hell, and while I'm not sure if that's how it's portrayed in the Bible, where you're given a shotgun and told to kill swarms of bad guys to cleanse your sins, I do like how the game presents that place through different phases of history within Purgatory, ranging from ancient times to the modern era. The final chapter begins with Eve, captured by Lucifer and sent straight to hell. Samael tells Daniel his mission is complete, all 4 of Lucifer's generals are dead, and that he can now enter heaven as promised. But Daniel refuses to abandon Eve.
I don't think you understand. That's rich.
Despite Samael's warning that he won't be able to return, he follows his heart, or maybe something lower, and goes after her.
Hey, don't worry about me.
After several water-themed levels, you finally reach your destination, Hell. And that's where the game delivers its best surprise. For a title that throws ninjas, monks, and skeletons at you, it's unexpected to see a level with that much depth and thought behind it. You'd expect Hell to be all fire, screams, and demons torturing the damned, but here it's shown in a disturbingly human way. Each scene reflects some of humanity's darkest moments, which doesn't need much imagination to understand why they belong there. After defeating Lucifer himself, Daniel finds Eve, but the game ends on a cliffhanger, with the armies of hell surrounding them both. The game also had a fairly popular multiplayer mode, so much so that it once had a $500,000 prize pool in esports in New York City, with the winner being our Quake master, Fatality.
$150,000 richer! The grand champion!
Unfortunately, the Painkiller franchise started to lose its spark after that. Several expansions were released, but most of them received mixed to poor reviews, criticized for messy level design, weak monster concepts, and clunky gameplay. While looking into the expansions, I quickly noticed how many times the Painkiller IP changed hands. Overdose, released in October 2007, began as a fan-made mod by Mindware Studios from the Czech Republic before Dreamcatcher officially stepped in to fund and support it. Resurrection came next in 2009, developed by Homegrown Games, followed by Redemption in February 2011. Like Overdose, Redemption started as a fan project under the name Eggtooth, before being picked up by Homegrown Games. Recurring Evil was released digitally on February 29, 2012, developed by MedArt and Eggtooth, becoming Dreamcatcher's final Painkiller release. The last entry in the series was Painkiller Hell and Damnation, a remake developed by the Farm 51. Aside from upgraded visuals, it added new weapons like the Soul Catcher, which fired saw blades and could unleash a beam that both damaged enemies and pulled in nearby souls. It also had this really cool extra power where you could make souls explode, spreading energy onto nearby enemies and turning them against each other. Another addition was the Bolt Gun, similar to the classic stake gun but capable of firing multiple stakes at once, with a secondary fire that launched a swarm of explosives. The game also introduced new modes, including co-op for the campaign and a survival mode. While the remake looked great, it lost its identity as it was ported to Unreal Engine, taking on that distinct Unreal look instead of keeping its own. It also faced criticism for its content. The developers chose not to include all the original campaign maps, focusing instead on a smaller selection with enemies reshuffled across them. This made the campaign noticeably shorter. The game also, for some reason I don't get, had all its cutscenes and story reworked.
I'm afraid that's my line.
Now, the Angel Samael is replaced by Death itself, who requires Daniel to gather 7 legions of souls. Eve is now, for some unknown reason, in love with Daniel but gets friend-zoned into oblivion by him, as he's still faithful to Catherine. I feel all that effort would have been far more useful if they had just left the story as it was and focused on adding more levels to the campaign instead of reworking something that didn't need fixing, especially since the rewrite just made the story worse than before. This isn't even a game where people care about the story. We just want to rip through waves of enemies. What really angered fans though was that the missing maps were later released as paid DLC, something players felt should have been part of the base game. The studio explained they didn't have enough time or staff to remaster every level for launch, so they focused on what they considered the best ones first. Still, that didn't excuse how short the campaign felt for the price. And even with the addition of a more fleshed out multiplayer mode, these kinds of games were no longer as popular at the time. So Hell and Damnation failed to make a strong comeback and quietly faded into obscurity. So now that we know what Painkiller was, let's see what this new version has to offer. The project was first announced in 2021 by Coop Media under its premium label Prime Matter. Since then, a lot has changed. Coop Media and Saber Interactive were both acquired by Embracer Group, and Coop Media itself rebranded as PlayOn. Eventually, Saber CEO Matthew Karch confirmed that Saber would now publish the game directly through Anshar Studios, cutting all ties with PlayOn, Embracer, and its original production roots. The first thing that jumps at you is how insanely similar it looks to Doom.
We're currently experiencing a demonic infestation. Care to help?
The arenas, the fast-paced movement, the dashing, the double jumping, the swinging, it's all there. Even the environments look familiar, though I'd say they remind me more of some Quake Champions maps than Doom. The gothic horror tone feels more decorative rather than atmospheric. Some environments do look impressive, like the giant creature whose skeleton form an entire level, but there's little sense of dread. The original Painkiller wasn't exactly terrifying, but it still felt grounded in horror. Then you look at this new game, and everything feels too clean, too bright. Instead of Daniel, you now play as 4, let's say generic-looking characters, each with different stats and abilities. You can only carry 2 weapons during each run, but you can attach mods that ultimately give you 4 options. This is where we see the most similarity with the old game. For example, the shotgun can now freeze enemies in an area of effect, or the electro driver that fires shurikens and lightning. That next one is surprising. The full campaign is gone, replaced by co-op and roguelike modes. Co-op seems to consist of arena-style fights where, from what I saw from early sponsored videos, you ultimately need to rack up enough kills fighting in arenas to unlock the path to the next area. The roguelike mode has your team running through procedurally generated levels using tarot cards and weapon upgrades to progress.
Full blood tank, ready to go.
So, okay, this sounds great, but as additional modes. I mean, if the game had a solid single-player campaign to back it up, I'd be more than happy to see those 2 modes added in for extra content. Right now, it just feels like they looked at that guy's comment, assumed everyone felt the same, and decided to take Hell and Damnation and only keep the co-op part. The gameplay adds modern movement mechanics, dashing, sliding, swinging, and wall jumping, and to be fair, that part fits well for Painkiller. The original was never slow by any means, especially once you learned how to strafe jump, yet these additions still feel like something that could belong in the franchise. I was honestly surprised by how smooth the game looked. Normally, Unreal Engine 5 games tend to launch buggy and unstable, but from the footage I've seen online, nothing looked messy. Though, to be fair, all those videos were sponsored, so take that as you will. Now, there are a few things I didn't enjoy. I didn't see any strafe jumping, and that sucked. I also don't like the cluttered screen filled with enemy health bars and damage numbers. I'm also a bit worried about the gameplay loop. I saw a few people saying they're already concerned the game might feel repetitive fast if there aren't more objectives or goals to break up the action.
I was already seeing a major crack in the game's foundations.
But my real problem with this game is that aside from the weapons and tarot cards, there's almost nothing I recognize from the original franchise. Even the monsters felt unfamiliar. Sure, there are some undead and demonic creatures here and there, but at this point, I just don't understand why they decided to call this game Painkiller. And if I remove the fact that I already knew the series, I don't see why I'd choose to play this game over others. Sure, it looks like it plays smoothly, but in the end, it feels like a mix of familiar modern shooter elements stitched together and branded with the Painkiller name. And I can't even say they did it for brand recognition, because Painkiller isn't exactly a household name anymore. That said, I can complain all I want, but the truth is, if this game hadn't been announced, I probably wouldn't have even remembered Painkiller existed. Maybe if it was a franchise I grew up with or had a stronger legacy, I'd feel more defensive about this reboot. But the series had been asleep, if not outright dead, for years. I won't be buying it. I'm not interested in co-op games, and it doesn't change much for me because even if they had released it under a new name, I still wouldn't have played it. But in a way, this announcement did something good. It reminded me of the original. I went back, replayed it, and had an absolute blast rediscovering how fun it still is.